The world sleeps, but the machines do not. In the dead of night, help is hours away, and a single error becomes a death sentence. Tonight, we examine 6 cases where the night shift became the final shift. This is not entertainment. It is a forensic look at isolation and gravity. Respect the machinery or become part of the statistics. It is November 11th, 2010. The time is exactly 3:15 a.m. at the port of Long Beach. The night air smells heavily of diesel exhaust and cold salt water. Harsh orange floodlights cut through the darkness. The port is incredibly loud. You hear the deep rumble of idling semi-truck engines. You hear the high-pitched hiss of hydraulics. This is a brutal place built entirely for heavy machinery. Human beings are just fragile obstacles navigating a dangerous grid of moving iron. Marco Velasquez is 34 years old. He is a veteran dock worker on the night shift. His job tonight is acting as a ground signalman. He stands firmly on the cold concrete in a bright yellow vest. He holds a heavy two-way radio in his gloved hand. Marco is tired. He is silently counting down the hours until his shift ends. He just wants to get back to his warm car and sleep. Right now, he is the only human link between the ship's deck and the empty truck waiting beside him. Marco completely trusts his environment. He stands under floating steel boxes every single night without fear. High above him is a colossal gantry crane. It is a towering mechanical beast. The crane lifts 40-ton loads using thick steel wire cables. These cables act like the artificial tendons of the machine. The system relies on the basic physics of tension, but every single lift stretches the steel slightly. Over months and years, this constant pulling causes microscopic cracks deep inside the individual metal strands. This is called metal fatigue. It is a silent killer. The outside of the cable looks perfectly fine to the naked eye, but deep inside the core, the steel is quietly tearing itself apart. Routine visual checks easily miss this internal decay. Eventually, the weakened metal simply reaches its breaking point. At 3:42 a.m., the crane operator lifts a 40-foot shipping container from the cargo vessel. The steel box is packed with dense automotive parts. It weighs over 42 tons. The crane swings the massive container out over the open dock. Marco stands directly in the drop zone. He looks straight up to verbally guide the blind operator. The container stops moving sideways. It hovers exactly 80 feet in the air. Suddenly, the microscopic cracks inside the main hoist cable finally connect. A deafening sound echoes across the terminal. It sounds exactly like a heavy artillery cannon. The primary steel rope snaps. The immense mechanical tension releases in a split second. The violently snapped steel cable whips through the cold air with a sharp crack. Time seems to drastically slow down. For a fraction of a second, the massive steel box simply hovers weightless against the pitch-black sky. Marco hears the explosive gunshot sound above him. His brain quickly registers the acoustic anomaly. But human physical reflexes are utterly useless against the relentless speed of gravity. He takes one hesitant half-step backward. A desperate instinct of self-preservation firmly kicks in. He stares upward as the heavy container begins its rapid vertical descent. Gravity seizes absolute control of the 42-ton mass. 80 feet of empty air offers zero physical resistance. It takes roughly 2.5 seconds for the falling steel to reach the concrete ground. In that brief window, Marco fully realizes his reality has collapsed. The dark shadow of the falling box rapidly expands across the bright concrete. It swallows him in sudden darkness. There is absolutely no escape radius. The corrugated steel structure strikes the ground with an unfathomable amount of kinetic energy. Marco is caught directly beneath the exact center of the falling mass. The fragile human body cannot possibly withstand that extreme level of sudden mechanical compression. Upon impact, Marco sustains catastrophic, non-survivable blunt force trauma. The sheer, overwhelming weight instantly defeats the structural integrity of his entire skeletal system. Total loss of consciousness is immediate. The massive transfer of kinetic energy results in sudden cardiac and respiratory arrest. The physical displacement of his body is absolute and final. He feels absolutely no pain. His central nervous system completely shuts down far faster than any pain signals can travel to the brain. This fatal event is a cold, mathematical transaction of mass, velocity, and gravity. The human element is simply erased from the physical equation. The deafening metallic boom of the collision forcefully rolls across the dark water. It slowly fades into the silent night. A thick cloud of pulverized concrete dust hangs suspended in the freezing air. The towering gantry crane stands completely motionless. Its broken steel cable violently sways back and forth in the wind like a massive dead pendulum. The truck driver waiting nearby sits totally paralyzed in his idling cab. Marco is gone. The only remaining physical sign that he was ever standing there is his broken two-way radio. It lies abandoned just inches outside the devastating crush zone. A small red LED light on the shattered plastic casing continues to blink rhythmically in the dust. It silently tries to maintain a connection that no longer exists. It is February 28, 2014. The time is exactly 2:15 a.m. at a massive metal recycling plant in Ohio. The freezing night air tastes like rust and machine oil. Fine iron dirt covers every single surface. The factory is incredibly loud. The deep roar of heavy machinery makes talking impossible. This brutal place is built to destroy heavy steel. Human beings are just fragile visitors in this dark kingdom of moving iron. Arthur Vance is 42 years old. He works the exhausting night shift as a heavy line technician. His job is to monitor the flow of scrap metal into the primary shredder. He stands on an elevated metal walkway. He wears thick leather gloves, steel-toed boots, and a heavy winter coat. Arthur is deeply tired. He just wants to keep the production line moving so he can hit his nightly quota and clock out. He is a seasoned veteran of the scrapyard. He trusts his own experience around dangerous equipment. But that deep familiarity is about to become his fatal blind spot. Arthur watches over a gigantic industrial hammer mill. It is an absolute monster of a machine. It is designed to reduce entire junk cars into fist-sized chunks of raw metal. A heavy-duty rubber conveyor belt carries raw scrap up a steep incline. The material drops blindly into a heavily armored steel drum. Inside this dark drum, a massive steel rotor spins at 600 revolutions per minute. Attached to this rotor are dozens of free-swinging steel hammers. Each hammer weighs over 400 pounds. They mercilessly smash anything that drops down the feed chute. Standard safety rules are very strict here. If the feed belt jams, the operator must completely cut the main electrical power. They must put a physical padlock on the main switch. But fully powering down the spinning rotor takes 20 long minutes. Restarting it takes another 20. In a factory driven by strict hourly quotas, shutting down the main line is highly discouraged. At exactly 2:40 a.m., a twisted piece of an aluminum truck bed gets wedged against the side of the conveyor belt. The heavy rubber belt instantly stops moving. The massive electric drive motor begins to loudly whine under the sudden mechanical strain. Arthur quickly assesses the situation. He makes a fatal calculation. He decides to save 40 minutes of precious production time. Instead of hitting the emergency kill switch, he steps onto the narrow metal catwalk right beside the stalled belt. He reaches out with both gloved hands to yank the jammed piece of aluminum free, but the heavy rubber belt is still under immense electrical tension. The instant Arthur pulls the metal snag loose, the powerful motor violently surges back to life. The conveyor violently jerks forward. It instantly resumes its rapid upward speed. A sharp, jagged edge of the moving scrap metal catches the thick canvas cuff of Arthur's winter jacket. Time suddenly slows down to a crawl. For one agonizing second, Arthur realizes he is physically tethered to a rapidly moving machine. He desperately plants his heavy boots onto the grated floor to pull backward. But the industrial drive motor has thousands of horsepower. Human muscle is mathematically useless against that extreme mechanical torque. The heavy belt aggressively drags his entire body forward. It pulls him completely off his feet. He violently loses his balance. He is dragged headfirst into the dark, vibrating feed chute. He travels up the steep incline in exactly 3 seconds. The deafening roar of the spinning hammer drum grows infinitely louder. He rapidly crosses the dark edge of the primary intake. There is absolutely no emergency stop cord within his reach. The physical interaction with the massive rotor is instantaneous and final. A fragile human body cannot survive inside an environment built to crush solid steel. Upon entering the primary impact zone, Arthur sustains catastrophic, non-survivable blunt force trauma. The initial mechanical strike delivers an overwhelming transfer of kinetic energy. The rotating steel hammers strike with the force of a freight train. This instantly negates the structural integrity of the human form. The overwhelming physical displacement of his body causes immediate cardiac and respiratory arrest. Total loss of consciousness happens in a fraction of a millisecond. He feels absolutely no pain whatsoever. His central nervous system completely shuts down much faster than pain signals can travel to the brain. This fatal event is simply a cold equation of industrial physics. The giant hammer mill continues to run at full speed. The deafening sound of grinding metal echoes across the freezing night lot. The heavy conveyor belt rolls smoothly, now completely cleared of the jam. Deep inside the dimly lit facility, a solitary yellow hard hat rolls slowly off the edge of the metal catwalk. It bounces once on the concrete floor below. It comes to a rest in the thick iron dust. The massive machine vibrates aggressively in the dark, blindly waiting for its next piece of scrap. It is May 9th, 2013. The time is exactly 1:45 a.m. A sprawling wind farm sits in the isolated plains of West Texas. The night air is bitter cold. It smells of dry dust and ozone. The only sound is the deep swoosh of massive fiberglass blades. They slice blindly through the heavy wind. This is a place of total vertical isolation. 300 feet above the dark earth, 28-year-old Daniel Hammond sits inside a machine. He is in the nacelle of a giant wind turbine. The nacelle is a fiberglass box roughly the size of a school bus. It sits at the very top of the steel tower. It holds the heavy electrical generator in the gearbox. Daniel is a skilled wind turbine technician. He wears a heavy safety harness, a hard hat, and thick work gloves. He is working completely alone on the night shift. His job tonight is a routine check of the hydraulic braking system. He is tired, but his hands move with the steady confidence of a professional. He tightens a final valve. He silently counts the hours until he can climb down and sleep. He feels perfectly safe in this cramped, high-altitude workspace. But this suspended metal box is basically a crowded engine room in the sky. It contains miles of high-voltage wiring. It also holds hundreds of gallons of flammable hydraulic fluid. This fluid is pressurized oil. It is used to physically turn the heavy turbine blades. The system operates under extreme pressure. If a hose leaks, the oil instantly turns into a fine, combustible mist. At exactly 2:03 a.m., a hidden electrical fault happens. It occurs deep inside a high-voltage control cabinet directly behind Daniel. A thick wire violently shorts out. A bright blue electrical arc jumps across the gap. It burns at thousands of degrees. This sudden spark strikes a nearby hydraulic line. The intense heat instantly melts the thick rubber hose. Highly pressurized oil erupts into the enclosed space. The electrical spark immediately ignites the oil mist. A blinding wall of fire explodes inside the cramped box. The temperature spikes to over 1,000 degrees in mere seconds. Thick, toxic black smoke instantly fills the tight space. It chokes the oxygen right out of the air. Daniel throws his arms over his face. He frantically scrambles backward. The fire spreads with terrifying speed. It rapidly eats the synthetic oil and plastic wire casings. The only way out of a wind turbine is a small steel trapdoor in the floor. This hatch leads down to a vertical ladder inside the main tower. But the trapdoor is now completely swallowed by a roaring column of fire. The intense heat physically blocks his only path to the ground. Desperate for breathable air, Daniel kicks open the top hatch. He pulls himself out onto the curved outer roof of the burning turbine. He stands up in the freezing night wind. He is exactly 300 feet above the solid ground. Behind him, the fiberglass housing begins to literally melt. It shoots massive flames into the dark sky. Time abruptly slows down to a crawl. The heat radiating against his back becomes totally unbearable. It starts to melt the thick rubber soles of his boots. Daniel looks down into the pitch-black abyss. He knows the local fire department does not have ladders that reach 300 feet. He is completely trapped. The structure beneath his feet is rapidly collapsing. The extreme heat physically pushes him to the very brink of the smooth roof, leaving absolutely no standing room remaining. Forced backward by the advancing thermal wave, he slips from the melting edge into the empty dark. Gravity immediately seizes control of his body. The fall lasts roughly 4.3 seconds. In that brief window, he accelerates to nearly 95 miles per hour. The empty air provides absolutely no physical resistance. The sudden impact with the hard earth is brutal and absolute. The extreme kinetic energy transfer is instantly devastating. A fragile human body cannot absorb that level of massive deceleration. Upon impact, Daniel sustains catastrophic, non-survivable blunt force trauma. The massive deceleration upon contact completely destroys the body's internal cohesion in an instant. Total loss of consciousness occurs in a fraction of a millisecond. The massive physical trauma causes immediate cardiac and respiratory arrest. His central nervous system completely shuts down. This happens much faster than any pain signals can travel to the brain. He feels absolutely nothing upon impact. The fatal event is a cold calculation of gravity, velocity, and mass. The tragedy ends in absolute silence on the dark ground. High above, the burning turbine lights up the empty plains like a colossal torch. The massive fiberglass blades slowly continue to turn in the wind. They cast long, fiery shadows across the fields. Down below, Daniel's yellow hard hat lies untouched in the dry grass. It rests quietly just a few feet away from the devastating crush zone. It is August 20th, 2011. The time is exactly 2:30 a.m. A massive hydroelectric dam sits quietly in the Pacific Northwest. The night air is incredibly heavy. It smells strongly of damp earth and cold, wet concrete. The entire concrete structure constantly hums. You can literally feel the deep vibration of giant turbines right through the soles of your boots. This is a colossal fortress of human engineering. It is designed to hold back millions of tons of raw river water. Samuel Gray is 45 years old. He is the senior night inspector for the facility. Tonight, he is working completely alone at the absolute bottom of the dam. He is walking inside a fully drained concrete spillway channel. He wears thick rubber waders, a yellow hard hat, and a bright headlamp. He carries a simple plastic clipboard. Samuel is tired but highly focused. His job is to carefully walk the dry channel floor and look for tiny cracks in the concrete. He is currently standing 50 feet below the waterline of the massive reservoir above him. He completely trusts the giant steel walls, holding back the dark lake. He has walked this exact same empty channel 100 times before. A modern hydroelectric dam relies on immense physical pressure to generate power. The deep water from the lake is held back by massive steel doors called sluice gates. These heavy gates weigh dozens of tons. They are lifted by incredibly powerful hydraulic pistons. The entire system is operated by a central automated computer network. Normally, this computer is locked out during human maintenance, but tonight, a hidden digital threat exists. A faulty water level sensor high up in the reservoir sends a sudden false critical alert. The central computer blindly reads this bad data. It calculates that the dam is rapidly overflowing. It automatically triggers an emergency pressure release protocol to save the structure. It bypasses the manual maintenance locks. At exactly 2:48 a.m., Samuel is shining his bright headlamp on a small surface crack. He is exactly 200 feet away from the nearest vertical escape ladder. Suddenly, he hears a sound that triggers an instant spike of pure adrenaline. It is the deep, agonizing groan of heavy steel sliding against concrete. High above him in the pitch-black darkness, the massive hydraulic pistons automatically engage. Sluice gate number 3 begins to rise. A deafening, thunderous roar rapidly echoes down the narrow concrete canyon. Time instantly slows down to an agonizing crawl. Samuel slowly turns his body around. His bright headlamp beam pierces the total darkness upstream. He sees a solid, frothing wall of white water violently exploding into the empty channel. Millions of gallons of freezing river water are suddenly released. They are driven forward by immense, crushing hydrostatic pressure. Samuel quickly drops his plastic clipboard. He takes one single futile step toward the distant steel ladder. The human survival instinct forcefully commands him to run, but human muscle mass is mathematically irrelevant against the raw speed of fluid dynamics. The towering wall of water strikes him at over 40 miles per hour. The sheer kinetic energy of the sudden impact is absolutely staggering. The fragile human biological structure cannot possibly withstand that level of extreme physical force. He is violently swept off his feet in a fraction of a second. He is forcefully slammed against the rough, unforgiving concrete wall of the channel. Upon this initial impact, Samuel sustains catastrophic, non-survivable, blunt force trauma. The sheer density of the rushing water acts like a solid hammer, instantly compressing the torso against the concrete. Total loss of consciousness occurs in a microscopic fraction of a millisecond. The violent underwater turbulence causes immediate cardiac and respiratory arrest. His central nervous system completely shuts down much faster than any physiological pain signals can travel to the brain. He feels absolutely no pain whatsoever. The fatal event is a cold mathematical transaction of gravity, water volume, and kinetic force. The massive, roaring wave continues to thunder down the narrow channel. It violently washes away absolutely everything in its destructive path. High above in the brightly lit control room, the computer screen quietly returns to normal. It simply shows the emergency gate sequence as successfully completed. Down in the dark, flooded concrete channel, the raging water slowly begins to calm. The deafening roar eventually fades into a steady, heavy flow. Samuel is completely gone. The environment blindly reclaims its original state. The only remaining physical sign that he was ever standing there is his yellow plastic clipboard. It bobs silently on the surface of the dark, freezing water. It slowly drifts away into the pitch-black night, carried forever by the endless current. It is January 6, 2011. The time is exactly 3 a.m. in downtown Boise, Idaho. The winter air is dangerously cold. It smells of freezing exhaust and crisp ozone. The city streets below are completely empty and silent. The yellow streetlights cast a faint glow on the hard concrete. High above the sleeping city, the wind violently whips against the smooth glass facade of a 20-story skyscraper. The massive building is a sheer vertical cliff of black glass and steel. 42-year-old Agustin Aguilera is an experienced window washer. He is working the quiet graveyard shift. He is suspended over 200 feet in the dark air. He stands inside a narrow motorized metal basket called a swing stage. He wears heavy insulated coveralls, a thick beanie, and a basic safety harness. Agustin is deeply tired. He works at night so his dripping soapy water does not bother daytime office workers. He methodically cleans the massive glass panels. He just wants to finish this final drop and go home to a warm bed. He completely trusts his heavy equipment. The swing stage relies on 2 independent electric winch motors. They lower the platform slowly down the building. It is a proven, reliable system built for high altitudes. But tonight, the dropping temperature introduces a hidden physical threat. Microscopic condensation has built up inside the left motor housing. At exactly 3:14 a.m., the freezing wind turns that trapped moisture into solid ice. The heavy internal gears instantly freeze together. The cold steel simply locks in place. The left motor violently binds and stops dead. But the right motor continues turning for 2 agonizing seconds. The entire metal platform violently tilts to a steep 45-degree angle. Agustin is thrown hard against the metal guardrail. He instinctively grabs the icy railing to stop himself from falling out. The automatic safety brakes loudly lock into place. The basket is now permanently jammed in a terrifying slant. Agustin is completely stranded 20 stories in the sky. His radio was smashed against the metal floor during the sudden impact. The offices inside the glass are totally dark and empty. No one can see him. The wind chill factor is quickly dropping below zero. Hypothermia is a fast-approaching and deadly threat. He knows his body cannot survive waiting hours for the morning crew to arrive. Agustin makes a desperate, fatal calculation. He carries 2 heavy-duty industrial suction cups on his tool belt. These are thick rubber tools designed to carry heavy panes of glass. He decides to unclip his safety harness. He plans to stick the cups to the building and slowly slide down to a lower balcony. He reaches over the tilted rail. He presses the heavy rubber cups against the dark window. He firmly locks the vacuum levers. He tests his weight. They seem to hold perfectly. He carefully climbs over the railing. He completely trusts his life to the rubber vacuum seal. He hangs vertically in the freezing night, holding only the 2 plastic handles. But he ignores a fundamental rule of thermodynamics. The thick glass is covered in a microscopic, invisible layer of frost. The rubber cups simply cannot maintain a perfect air seal against freezing moisture. Time suddenly slows down to a crawl. A loud, sharp pop echoes in the quiet air. The left suction cup instantly loses its vacuum grip. It completely detaches from the icy glass. Agustin violently drops 2 feet. He is now hanging 200 feet in the air by one single freezing arm. The human body is simply not built to support its entire weight on one shoulder joint for very long. Lactic acid instantly floods his right arm. The muscle fibers in his shoulder are pushed beyond their biological limit under the extreme mechanical load. His muscles begin to violently shake. The extreme cold rapidly drains his remaining physical strength. He hangs there for exactly 42 seconds. The sleeping city spreads out beautifully below him. It is completely blind to his desperate struggle. Finally, his frozen fingers simply open. Gravity instantly seizes total control of his body mass. The fall lasts exactly 4 seconds. The dark, empty air provides absolutely no physical resistance. He rapidly accelerates toward the concrete sidewalk. The human biological structure cannot possibly survive a sudden impact at over 80 miles per hour. Upon hitting the ground, Agustin sustains catastrophic, non-survivable blunt force trauma. The massive kinetic energy of the impact instantly renders survival physically impossible. Total loss of consciousness happens in a microscopic fraction of a millisecond. The overwhelming physical displacement causes immediate cardiac and respiratory arrest. His central nervous system completely shuts down much faster than any physiological pain signals can travel to his brain. He feels absolutely no pain upon impact. This fatal event is a cold, mathematical transaction of gravity, altitude, and velocity. The tragedy ends in complete silence on the dark, empty street. High above, the tilted metal platform sways gently in the freezing wind. One single industrial suction cup remains firmly stuck to the black glass on the 20th floor. It holds perfectly still in the dark, quietly waiting for the morning sun. It is March 2nd, 2014. The time is exactly 4:15 a.m. The location is a sprawling industrial auto salvage yard on the desolate outskirts of London. The weather conditions are absolutely miserable. A relentless, freezing rain falls hard from the pitch-black sky. It turns the dirt ground into a deep, unstable swamp of oil and mud. The environment is a chaotic labyrinth of rusted metal skeletons. Thousands of crushed vehicles are stacked in precarious towers. They loom 20 feet high like jagged steel totems in the dark. This is a graveyard of machinery. It is silent except for the rhythmic drumming of cold rain on hollow metal hoods. James Amory is 26 years old. He is a skilled heavy machinery operator working the solitary graveyard shift. He sits inside the heated cab of a massive telescopic handler. This machine is a heavy-duty forklift with a long, extendable boom. It is designed to lift tons of dead weight with hydraulic precision. James is tired. The hypnotic rhythm of the windshield wipers creates a false sense of security. The warm hum of the cabin heater makes him feel safe from the storm outside. His task tonight is routine, but physically dangerous. He is reorganizing a row of scrap sedans to make room for new inventory. He feels perfectly protected inside his machine. The cab is reinforced with a thick steel roll cage. It is engineered to protect the operator from falling debris. But James is about to encounter a limit of engineering that no safety cage can withstand. He slowly approaches a stack of 3 crushed SUVs. The ground beneath this specific stack is soft. It is completely saturated with rainwater. The heavy mud has slowly compromised the stability of the foundation over the last 6 hours. As James maneuvers his fork tines to lift a vehicle nearby, the heavy rubber tires of his loader displace the wet earth. This slight vibration travels through the liquid mud. It acts as the final trigger for a hidden physical trap. The stack of SUVs next to him weighs approximately 6 tons. It suddenly shifts its center of gravity. A loud metallic groan echoes through the yard as the steel frames grind against each other. James looks up through the reinforced glass roof of his cab. In the harsh, blinding glare of his floodlights, he sees the impossible. The towering column of metal is slowly tilting directly toward him. Time instantly seems to stop. The human brain tries to process the geometry of the falling mass, but the physics of the situation are already irreversible. James instinctively grabs the hydraulic control levers to reverse, but the machine is heavy. It is sluggish in the deep, sucking mud. The massive stack of cars crosses the tipping point. Gravity seizes absolute control of the 6-ton mass. The collapse takes exactly 1.8 seconds. The laws of physics dictate that the potential energy of the falling steel must be converted into kinetic impact. The top SUV is a heavy steel chassis from the 90s. It leads the descent. It strikes the roof of James's cab with the force of a falling meteorite. The protective steel roll cage is engineered to withstand a certain amount of impact, but it is not designed to support the dynamic crushing weight of 3 full-size vehicles dropping from a height of 15 feet. The structural integrity of the safety cage fails instantly. The thick steel bars buckle and fold like wet cardboard. The roof of the cab is violently driven downward. It compresses the operator's compartment into a space less than 12 inches high. Upon impact, James sustains catastrophic, non-survivable trauma. The collapsing steel obliterates the cabin space, simply leaving no physical dimensions for the operator to exist. The overwhelming physical displacement of the cab leaves absolutely no space for biological life. Total loss of consciousness occurs in a microscopic fraction of a millisecond. The massive transfer of kinetic energy causes immediate cardiac and respiratory arrest. His central nervous system completely shuts down much faster than any physiological pain signals can travel to the brain. He feels absolutely nothing. The fatal event is a cold, indifferent transaction of mass, gravity, and structural limits. The crashing sound of the collapse rolls like thunder across the wet yard. It is quickly swallowed by the noise of the rain. The heavy loader sits motionless in the mud. It is now buried under a chaotic mound of twisted metal. The headlights of the crushed machine are still on. They cast 2 bright beams of light into the falling rain. Inside the wreckage, the weight of the fallen cars presses down on the steering column. It triggers the electric horn. A continuous, mournful tone blasts into the dark night. It sounds a singular, endless note that no one is around to hear. The rain continues to fall on the rusted steel. It washes the mud from the tires. The environment is completely indifferent to the tragedy that has just occurred in the shadows. There is a reason we fear the night shift. The silence plays tricks on your mind, and the isolation makes everything dangerous. I know many of you work while the world sleeps. What is the single scariest, most unexplainable thing you have ever seen or felt while working alone in the dark? Don't hold back. Share your night shift horror stories below. I read the best ones.